I thought I'd record a response video to Fabled Verse, who I'm a huge fan of. I think he's a legend, brilliant. Wearing this in homage to him. His video about his sexual struggles was a really interesting one, and it's interesting to me because I have what I assume is a very different background. And it's probably a good point to introduce to the couple of people who give a damn, who are watching me, about like my background and where I come from. So you can probably hear I don't sound like I'm from North America. There's a good reason. I grew up in New Zealand. Very typical New Zealand background. Not a lot to report there. Went to school, was brought up a Catholic, so I had the whole background of being baptized and confirmed and first communion and all of that jazz. Rebelled against it when I started asking too many questions in Sunday school, so I wasn't popular there. And I have to confess that now I don't believe in a higher being. Not that that makes any difference to anything that I'm about to say, but, I thought it was relevant. So the My Sexual Struggles video is very much about, as I understood it, was certainly the first part, was all about Fabled Verse's dealings with what he thought the world thinks about homosexuality. And about 2/3 of the way through, he started to deal with a subject that I find really interesting. And I find it interesting because I'm a scientist. I have a background in biochemistry and chemistry and physics and so on. In fact, if I wasn't unemployed right now, that's what I would be doing. And I have a different... Well, not a different. I agree with him in that he believes that a large chunk, or at least a chunk, or some homosexuality is innate. It's genetic. It's biological. And there's a few good reasons for thinking that's true. I just burped, not in homage to Fabled Verse, though. There are a number of good reasons for thinking that homosexuality is an innate thing. The first one, of course, is that nature does it. So there are entire schools of animals that do it. You've got bears who, like black bears, who form lesbian couples and raise children. You've got penguins who famously adopt eggs that nobody else will take. You've got birds engaging in homosexuality. You've got transgendered fish. Fish will quite happily swap gender at a whim. From one season to another, they'll change from male to female and then go and reproduce. You've got birds that will disguise themselves as male or female. You've got cuttlefish. Cuttlefish are famous for it. Male cuttlefish will change half their colour to make themselves look like they're male, and then half their colour to make themselves look like female, so that they can sneak in and blend in with the girls on the outside, but attract girls on the other side. That gender bending is something that nature does far more interestingly than we do. But it's probably worth pulling out a couple of terms that are thrown around. So you've got sexual behavior being homosexuality, you've got heterosexuality, you've got bisexuality, you have asexuality. Let's not forget that there are some people who are not attracted to any particular group and aren't interested in sex at all. That's the attraction. That's not the same thing as the behavior. So men who have sex with men aren't necessarily the ones who are identifying as homosexual. Famously, you have the entire, for want of better words, down low movement in the US, although it's certainly not a unique thing to them. There are entire parks devoted to that sort of behavior in all sorts of countries. You have gender. Gender is not the same thing. So you can be transgendered and still be attracted to people of an opposite sex to what you were biologically born as. So these are all confusing. Well, they're not confusing. They're all complicated ideas. The idea that you are brought up homosexual, or that you were born homosexual is, as I say, a very biological one. There are a large number of bits of research that have gone into the fact that the attraction to male or female bits is very biological. There are an older mother, it stands to reason that there's a higher chance that you will have more older siblings because she may have had previous children. Those are all connected. There are studies that link homosexual men with hypermasculinity, and that in a biological sense. So there are certain things that we consider to be androgenic or androgenic features. For example, arm length. Your forearm length to your, I guess you call that hind arm length, is a masculine trait, the ratio of those lengths. Gay men, on average, come out to be more male than the rest of the population. That all looks biological. That all looks like something biological and real and measurable from science is going on. But you raised another point, Fabled Verse, which was that there is also nurture. Nurture, to me, implies a psychological or behavioral thing going on, which is not a real thing. That's just classifying it as something different. There are schools of thought now coming up called epigenetics. Epigenetics is the study of things that, and it's what I did a lot of research for the last 3 years on. It's a study of things that are inherited but are not genetic. So they're not written on DNA, but they are inherited. You can pass them on. In my humble opinion, we will find that gayness or homosexuality, or whichever term you want, the attraction to men, will turn out to be an epigenetic thing, I think. And if I had $1 million to do research, I'd be following that up. That is not to say there's something wrong. It is not to say that there is something to be cured. It's to say that we wish to understand what's going on in the same way that we wish to understand how hair grows, or why people have skin, or why anything goes on in the world. It's a scientific curiosity. Nurture affects the behavior. It does not, in my opinion, affect the underlying thing going on, which is an attraction to people that are like you or different to you. My hunch is that these are epigenetic. They're still very real, but in the event that I get some more time, I would actually like to. I'm reading a lot about this, and I would very much like to write a book on it. So, in the event that I have a lot more time to myself, I'll be writing that book. But hopefully that was helpful and meaningful, and yeah, I would like to say again that I love Fabled Verse and all of his work, and think he's a legend in his own right. Okay, so have a good day, YouTube.